Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. Every 4 years, an event happens that the whole world watches, eagerly anticipating the winner amid much pomp and circumstance, the waving of the red, white, and blue, and patriotic slogans and songs. No, it's not the Summer Olympics. I'm talking, of course, about the presidential election. Unlike the Olympics, there is only one winner, and we have to endure far, far more than just a couple of weeks of television disruption. Already, we've had months of debates between the candidates for the Republican nomination. The winner will take on President Barack Obama in next November's general election. Now, President Obama is virtually unopposed for the Democratic nomination, which is often the case for an incumbent seeking a second term. That's also why we're talking today only about the GOP candidates. Those of us who have been watching the Republican debates and following the news about those candidates are right now scratching our heads about who the GOP nominee might be. With the Iowa caucuses just completed and the first primary of the season just 2 days away in New Hampshire, it's looking more like it'll be down to just a couple of candidates before long. Or will it? My guest today is Rudy Lewis, chairman of the Peoria County Republicans. We'll discuss this and other things after these messages. Welcome back to the Peorian. My guest today is Rudy Lewis, chairman of the Peoria County Republican Party. Rudy, in the fall, during the debates, it seemed like we had different front runners. We'd have a front runner, then somebody else would come from behind and kind of take the lead. A lot of times it was because the front runner maybe said something that the voters didn't like, or the situation with Herman Cain and that sort of thing. At the time the show was recorded, this show was recorded, it was before the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
It seemed like the field of serious contenders was starting to narrow a little bit. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Right now, the most serious of contenders, obviously Newt Gingrich is on top of the polls, and Mitt Romney is falling close behind. Hanging out there with a constant, you have Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry. I don't know where he's going to fall in that, if he even falls out before this is aired. But I tend to be pragmatic, and what the Republican voters are looking for, unfortunately, might be another Ronald Reagan. And it's going to be hard to find. There's no one with that combination of attributes that we have in any particular one candidate. I think as far as Newt Gingrich, everybody focuses on his baggage.
Yes.
But everybody knows about it. There aren't too many things that can come out that most people, because he has been such a public figure right now, that we wouldn't know about. Obviously with Herman Cain, when those things came out, even though he was leading the pack, everybody was impressed with the fact, here's a businessman. Obviously, he didn't have those foreign relation credentials that he may have had. But going back to the two top runners right now, with Mitt Romney, Mitt's had a lot of time to study a lot of the foreign relation issues. He is a good businessman. He's proven that. I think either of the two top candidates right now would do very well against Barack Obama and his record. The biggest issue with Mitt is obviously what happened with the medical situation in Massachusetts following something like Obamacare was modeled after it. I mean, he's come up with an explanation on that. Newt, I think, probably when it goes toe-to-toe in a debate, can handle himself very well. So.
Why can't Republicans seem to get behind Mitt Romney?
I think it has to do more with where he stood in the past on issues.
Okay.
His explanation is that he's evolved from where he was before. The problem with that is that if you evolve too quickly in such a short period of time, it looks more like a flip-flop. I can tell you, quite frankly, that in my lifetime, before I went to Vietnam, I was probably a liberal. After I came back from Vietnam, it's like the puppy that had his eyes opened, and I looked at things in a different way. Something in your life changes how you feel about a particular subject, and that's has to be something that impacts you rather dramatically in order to make that change. Whether it's just an instant or whether it's, for example, I lost my oldest son and it changed the way I looked at drug abuse. And those are types of things that can influence a candidate as well. I would hate, being a pragmatic individual, I would hate to think that it is just in order to win the vote at that time. I go back to Jimmy Carter, and I was always amazed at the anomaly. No matter where he was in tune with the crowd. Mm-hmm. So that meant that at one point he was not telling the truth, because he agreed. It's the old Lincoln adage, you can please some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. And if you are, well, then you've got a problem with being honest with yourself.
Which of the Republican candidates do you expect to be on the Illinois ballot at the primary?
See, that's another issue altogether, because as chairman, the only petitions that I've seen as far as delegates is Romney. And now they're pushing to get, I've gotten some people that are pushing to get Newt on the ballot. Mostly, people need an education as to the primary. I was the co-chairman of the Reagan for President Committee in 1980 in the 18th Congressional District. We had a blind primary. That blind primary meant that you would see a list of names of individuals running as delegates, but there was no other name associated with them. You didn't know who they were supporting.
I see.
Our job was to get out that list of names in association with the candidate they were supporting, which happened to be Ronald Reagan. We took 1, 2, 3 in that primary. We left a 4th spot open. We were hoping to bring Bob Michael on board. He did vote in the first round for Ronald Reagan. But you could have won the primary, which is a beauty contest in Illinois, but without any delegates, it would make you hard to get elected. So, and the same thing right now. If Romney has delegates in Illinois, and Mitt Romney has delegates, and his opposition doesn't, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Republican candidates and what the party believes it has to do to win in November. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm with Rudy Lewis, chairman of the Peoria County Republicans. Right before the break, Rudy, we were talking about which Republican presidential candidates we might see on the Illinois ballot on March 20th. At this point, it doesn't look like there's going to be very many. When is the deadline? Has the deadline passed for them to file?
No, and I don't have the exact. They changed that deadline because there is right now for congressional candidates, but the only ones that I have actually physically seen as far as delegates is the Romney delegates. I know there are people right now circulating for Ron Paul.
Oh, okay.
So chances are I have not seen anything from Michelle Bachmann. As I said, Newt is just getting out, and nothing for any of the other candidates that have come across my desk. Usually they send them to the chairman to get them out to the precinct committeeman so they can get those things circulated.
They're not conceding Illinois to Obama, are they?
That had been I was kind of concerned about that. I was hoping they weren't, because obviously we just elected Mark Kirk to what, I hate to say, it was the people's seat for the United States Senate, but it was occupied by Barack Obama, and Mark Kirk, actually a Republican, won that seat. So to me, it would be silly to concede Illinois simply because this is where Barack Obama lives. It's going to be a tough nut to crack, I'm going to be honest with you, but at the same time, there's a lot of votes here.
Throughout the debate season in the fall, We heard Republican candidates say that their true opponent, even then, was Barack Obama, rather than their fellow Republicans. Was that gamesmanship or just trying to get into the minds of the voters the question of electability?
Everybody tries to follow Reagan's 11th commandment, and that is speak no ill of fellow Republicans, because obviously one of the first things your opposition is going to do is take everything that has been said and the accumulation of all of those comments, and they'll use that directly against you. As far as gamesmanship, there have been some barbs pitched between the candidates, and you, as a chairman, you kind of cringe a little bit knowing that some of those things could be used against them. We spoke earlier about the baggage that each one of the candidates carried. The more well-known of the candidates, obviously Newt and Romney, a lot has been gone through as far as their past goes. I don't foresee a lot new coming up. Ron Paul could do well in the Iowa the caucuses, and that goes again to most people they don't know how a caucus works. They have a presidential primary, and the people get to pick the candidate who they like best in that primary. However, the caucus is a simple situation where you have to get an X number of delegates, and it's a whittling down process. Okay. The old caucus used to be, if you were for a candidate, you got everybody in the room and you chose up corners. You know, obviously there were more than 4 candidates, you'd have somebody in the middle. But what you would do is that the one with the least amount of delegates would have to choose another corner. And they whittle that process down until you've got only 2 left, and then the one with the most delegates ends up basically being the nominee. And that was just the rudimentary of how a caucus works. Try and get, and that's why they're talking to these. And the caucus is what matters. Not necessarily because, same thing with, as I said, delegates in Illinois. You may win the state of Illinois in the primary, but if you don't have any delegates, you're in trouble.
How important is it to win, for a Republican candidate, to win the caucus, Iowa caucus, and then follow up with a strong showing in New Hampshire?
I look at this, and what I've seen in the past is that there have been people that have won the Iowa caucus and then never gone any further. Just this morning they were talking about it. If they win the Iowa caucus, New Hampshire is so adamant that they want the selection to themselves that they may vote against you just because you won the Iowa caucus. And that's happened before. It's been split, both in Republican and Democrat. But you never know. You might win both of those and then not go on to be president anyway.
Okay.
So
we're going to take a break now for messages from our sponsors. But first, here is the Peorian's own Kevin Kaiser to talk about what's going on in the literary and culinary world.
Hey, happy Sunday. You want to know what's going on in my literary and culinary world? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. First off, let's talk about the Peorian website. Now, every week you see me here in my office-like set talking about things of a literary nature. Well, guess what? I do the same thing on the website, except I don't talk. I type in words that are visible to the naked eye and therefore capable of being read. So if you like listening to me say those words on TV, give your eyes a treat and let them read similar but different words over at thepeorian.com in the Literaria. That's where you can see my musings without having to deal with my annoying voice. Now, in the Literaria, we talk about good novels that have turned into pretty good films. It's easy to find good novels that turn into crappy movies. They come out almost monthly. But every so often, a good book gets turned into a good film. In good novels that turned into pretty good films, I've taken a look at 4 of them. Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, The Godfather by Mario Puzo, and A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. If you have any suggestions, let us know on the website or on the Facebook. Speaking of, why haven't you liked us on Facebook? Are we going to continue to play this game, this silly little game of pursuit, when we both know it's inevitable? All you have to do is bing, like us. It's that easy. But don't do it because I'm telling you. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Okay, I think I have a little more time left, so you know what that means? Literary Lightning Round. That's where I talk about one book chosen at random by the Litertron 5000 Wayback Machine. So here we go. No whammies, no whammies, no whammies. Yes, The Last Tycoon, I can do this. Okay, F. Scott Fitzgerald, great unfinished work. This is what he was working on when he died in 1940. It tells the story of an up-and-coming production boss in Hollywood, which was something familiar to Fitzgerald, who was struggling as a screenwriter at the time of his demise. The novel was brought to the silver screen in 1976, starring Robert De Niro and Jack Nicholson. What's interesting about the film is you can hear the point where F. Scott's words end and the screenwriters begin. But it's still an excellent movie and a rare chance to see De Niro and Nicholson face off on screen in an epic ping pong battle. Intense. Well, that's all for this week. Go watch a commercial.
We're back with Rudy Lewis, head of the Republican Party in Peoria County. Could we see somebody who's not even in the picture right now just kind of jump in between now and the convention?
It's possible. Obviously, the one candidate that we haven't spoken a whole lot about is Ron Paul, and he has a very, very strident following. If the only thing I would comment to those folks, would they stop putting their stickers on lampposts? It's just, to me, it's one of those things where there's a certain amount of decorum involved with it. But they are very supportive of Ron. He has a very hard following that is going to stay with him no matter where he is on an issue. But he remains consistent. As far as a dark horse candidate, the one thing that you have to look at, and this could also apply to Newt in the fact that the organization, Mitt Romney has a very, very large backing and organization, and has, as I said, he has submitted his candidacy in most of the states. So he will be collecting delegates, and that's the key, is the delegates. If a dark horse came out, he would have to be someone who already has that organization.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be very difficult. It would have to be someone who possibly has, whether it's a celebrity or someone that has a following right now that could put together an organization in a short period of time. The Iowa caucuses are coming up on us. I mean, we're within weeks of that, and New Hampshire, so it's a short time period. I really don't foresee anything. If, for example, someone like a Trump were to come out with an independent candidacy, it could be a spoiler as far as the general election goes. I would hope that wouldn't happen. I've seen it too often in the past.
What about Sarah Palin?
I think Sarah Palin, as far as her ambitions go right now, would not step in for fear of that. I think she understands how things work. I can't foresee anybody, with the exception of maybe someone who is a candidate right now, who's been involved in the primary process and debates, might feel that they have a better chance as an independent. But if you lose the party's nomination, it doesn't bode well for you, because you need that support.
I've seen some, I don't want to use the term parallel, but similarities, I guess, in the Gingrich candidacy with McCain 4 years ago. The old warhorse candidate who nobody paid any attention to when they first kind of got into the race, and all of a sudden this kind of came from the back of the pack into the lead. Would you agree with that? I mean,
there are some similarities in the fact that they came from the back of the pack to go forward, but as far as the political philosophies and where they stand on issues, John McCain tended to be, even as a United States Senator, contrarian, and by that I mean a lot of time he didn't follow the Republican line. There were a lot of supporters that felt that, well, he has the military background as far as being able to handle foreign affairs. I think his weakest point probably was on the economy. So going into that election without a real strong economic focus, and obviously most people going into that last election was, they saw what had happened. And the whole irony of that election was, and I hear people talking about George Bush and what he left, it didn't happen until 2008. Most people don't realize our unemployment rate was below 5%. until 2008. I mentioned to you that one of the programs I was involved with was home ownership with the state treasurer's office. And I worked with Freddie Mac. And after I saw what was happening with adjustable rate mortgages and some of the other things that were going on, I couldn't understand how the housing market had held up as long as it did. The foreclosures started rolling in, and once that happened in 2008, it was all over. That bubble burst, and there were a lot of people that had propped this up, Republican as well as Democrat, thinking everybody needs a house, but you should be able to afford the house you're in. So that being said, I think President Obama at one point was one of the biggest pushers of this program. He can stand back and point fingers, but he has to go back in his past and look at where he was on this issue. As a matter of fact, he was one of the attorneys that, for a minority group in Chicago, before a federal judge, pushed these subprime mortgages, and from there on out, it's history.
We have to cut it off, Rudy. I want to thank you for your time.
Been a pleasure.
And hope you enjoyed today's show. And remember, you can see it in its entirety on our website, thepeorian.com. And watch us every Sunday at 8 a.m. here on WHOI. Have a good week.
Música